So you just took this awesome job with the software company as a network technician. And as soon as you sit down with the boss, he puts these items right in front of you. And you're like, what in the world is going on here? He says, hey, I need you to get this all set up. I need you to go to the server rack and I need you to install these. I also need you to put basic configurations. We need to get these things ready to go because I have a whole bunch of people in this office and they like to send a lot of emails. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Module 2, Basic Switch and End Device Configuration. My name is Mr. Tandy at Tandy IT, and this is Intro to Networks. So here we go, and buckle up. So some of the things we're going to be getting into with this module, we're going to look at the Cisco iOS. Okay, we're going to explain how to access the Cisco iOS device configuration and its purposes. Okay, we're going to take a look at those items. We're going to look at the iOS navigations. We're going to explain how to navigate through the Cisco iOS. Okay, we're going to describe the common structure of iOS software. We're going to configure iOS device using command line interface. Okay, I am going to show you the difference and show you what command line is. It is a different type of a language that's proprietary to Cisco. Pretty cool. We're going to use iOS commands to save the running configuration. We're going to explain how devices communicate across the network. And we're going to configure host devices with an IP address, okay, Internet Protocol IP address. And then we're going to verify connectivity between two end devices. So if you watched Module 1, we talked about connectivity. That's that Marco Polo. When I say Marco, you say Polo. That's the ping command, right? That's being able to verify that those items are up and running. So the Cisco iOS. So let's take a look at this section here. We're going to talk about 3 different items here. We're going to talk about operating systems. We're going to talk about the shell, the kernel, and the hardware. The shell, the user interface that allows users to request specific tasks from the computer. These requests can be made through either CLI or GUI interfaces, or known as the GUI. In the IT world, we call this the GUI. The kernel communicates between the hardware and the software of a computer and manages how hardware resources are used to meet software requirements. Okay. Hardware, the physical part of the computer, including underlying electronics. Okay. So before we get going here, we're going to talk more about this because we're going to talk more about the CLI versus the GUI. And if you don't know what the GUI stands for, okay, if you know what the GUI stands for, I'm going to write this up here. GUI stands for, let's pick a different color here. GUI stands for the graphical, okay, graphical, and forgive me, I'm trying to do this with a mouse, graphical user interface. Okay, that's what the GUI stands for, the graphical user interface. CLI stands for command. Wow, this is really hard with a mouse, but it's pretty fun too and interesting. Command line. And see if you can guess what the I stands for. Yes, you guessed it. Interface. Okay? Interface. I know it's kind of hard to read. So, GUI stands for the graphical user interface, and command line stands for the command line interface. CLI stands for the command line interface. Okay? So, make sure you keep those going because we are going to go back to those. We're going to talk more of those in depth here. Okay? Now the GUI, going back to the GUI stands for graphical user interface, right? Allows the user to interact with the system using an environment of graphical icons, menus, and windows. So essentially, folks, this is what we do on a daily basis, right? The average user is going to get on a computer, going to click the start button, maybe do a search, maybe double click on a couple items to manipulate the computer in a user interface, right? A graphical sense, right? A GUI is more user-friendly and requires less knowledge of the underlying command structure that controls the system. So you double click on the icon, okay? You're manipulating the machine. However, there are some command line things that do the same thing, okay, using command line. But we know it as essentially just double clicking, which is pretty cool. Examples of these are Windows, Mac, Linux, Apple, all that good stuff. Sorry. GUIs can fail, crash, and simply not operate as specified. For these reasons, network devices are typically accessed through the command line interface. Very, very important, through the command line interface. Moving on here. The purpose of an operating system, okay? The PC operating system enables a user to do the following: use a mouse to make selections and run programs, enter text and text-based commands. Command line-based network operating systems enables the technicians to do the following: use a keyboard to run command line interfaces, network programs, use a keyboard to enter text-based commands, and to view the output monitor. So I'm going to put a little graphic up here, okay, and we're going to get more in depth with the command line and the GUI. I want to put a little graphic up here, and I want you to tell me, what is this right here? What does this represent? These are random ones and zeros. What do you think this is? Put a question mark there. What do you think that is? Send me an email, christopher.tandy@rccd.edu. Send me an email on that and tell me what you think that is, because this right here is how the manipulation works with the computers, okay? This is how that works. So we're going to get more into this. So let's take a look at a graphic here. Let me pull up because we're going to get more in depth with the GUI versus the operating system. Okay, so let me pull up my File Explorer here. And you can't see it just yet because I'll move it over here just shortly. Okay. Okay. So on this side, okay, I have my File Explorer. Got my pictures up and everything too. And there's my packet tracer, all that good stuff. Okay, let's close that. Oh, we don't want to do that. All right. So here's my File Explorer. Okay. And on the right-hand side, on the split screen, I'm going to put up the command line interface. Okay. So on the left side here, we have let me write this up here. On the left side, we have the GUI. Okay. And on the right side, we have CLI. Okay. This is the command line interface, and this is the GUI. Okay. Now we're just going to use command prompt here for this example because I want you guys to see the difference between the two and how they both do the same thing, but there's one way to manipulate what we needed to do. One is using commands, the other one's using the graphical sense. Okay. So using the GUI, looking on this side, okay, using the GUI. If I wanted to double click on things, I would just use my cursor, double click, kind of go through different files if I need to, things of that nature, just like this, okay? These are all stuff that deals with teaching. I do all that good stuff, and there we go, right? Okay. So for this case, I'm going to double click on the C drive, okay? So you saw me just double click on the C drive. All I did was double click. Now, I'm going to go into command line over here. I'm going to type in some commands here. I'm going to hit CD / here, which is going to give me to the root of the C drive, okay, the root of the C drive. All right. Now, instead of me double clicking here, manipulating the computer, I have to give it a command. And the command I just gave it is the dir command. You don't need to know these commands. This is just something for this example. And notice when I typed in the dir command, the same result that I had with double clicking on the C drive using the GUI, I was able to I was able to type in the command dir to give me the same results, right? If I wanted to look inside of a folder, let's say, for example, I wanted to look inside this test folder, okay? Looks like I've created some documents in there for testing. I would type in cd test, which stands for change directory. And now I've actually, using the GUI, I would double click in it to get into the test folder. But using command line, I actually typed in a command in order to get into the folder. Okay, so that's a quick little demo on how the difference between the GUI and command line works. Okay, because Cisco commands, got to know the command lines base with Cisco, because Cisco has a lot of their pretty much all their items are proprietary to how you configure their devices. There are some regular commands that do work too, but Cisco has their own proprietary commands. So let's talk about ways to get into this thing, right? Because we got to be able to access it. Okay, we got to be able to access. So we have a couple methods. We have the console, we have secure shell, okay, and we have telnet. Okay, console cable, a physical management port used to access a device in order to provide maintenance, such as performing the initial configurations, right? We're going to need that cable. Remember, this is the cable that I showed you earlier in this video. Secure shell, okay, establishes a secure remote command line connection to a device through a virtual interface over a network, right? This is recommended method for remotely connecting to a device using a secure shell, okay? Telnet, which is absolutely unsecure. Don't ever use Telnet. Don't use it. Don't use it. Telnet establishes an insecure remote command line connection to a device over the network. User authentication and password commands are sent over the network in plain text, so anybody can see that. That's why we don't want to use those at all. So some examples here shows PuTTY. Okay, so I actually have a couple Cisco switches set up on my network, so I'll kind of show you that. So here is a PuTTY configuration, and it's using port 22, which is a secure port. And we will get into more of these ports and how these work and what is a port, because this is very, very important. We will go into depth in that. So if I were to access my Cisco switch using secure shell, okay, I would type in the IP address, okay, and that would get me in using the network. Now, if I was local, I would use a serial cable, okay, which means that it's actually attached to this computer, right? So I can actually use it this computer. Cisco Packet Tracer does a really good job with virtualizing this environment. So you'll see a lot of this when we do these items. Pretty cool, okay? So we'll get more into that a little bit later in some of the modules. And yep, so here's just an example. These are some of the different terminal emulation programs you can use. We just talked about PuTTY. TerraTerm is another one. The iOS navigation. So now we're going to get into the basics of the configurations. And there are a couple things that you need to know right off the bat as soon as you get into these switches. Okay, there's a couple different modes that you need to understand, because there are certain things that you won't be able to do not unless you're able to identify some of these modes. So let's go over these modes. The first mode is user exec mode. Okay, and that's usually signified by this, let's call this a right arrow here, right? Like kind of like that greater than sign. So if you ever see that greater than sign, that's pretty much you are in what's called user exec mode. So this is essentially like In the IT world, we call this the principle of least privilege. We only allow people to do what they need to do, which is basically to do their jobs. We don't give them administrative rights. So that's kind of what this mode is, kind of the principle of least privilege, the user exec mode. And then we have privilege exec mode, and that's signified by this little hashtag. Oh, excuse me, by this hashtag right here. Okay. And we all know these hashtags. We see these hashtags all the time in social media, right? When we're trying to tag somebody. So this means you're in privilege exec mode, and this is essentially what would be your running things as an admin, like an administrator. Oops, grabbed the wrong one. Sorry. This would be like running everything as an administrator. Okay, so this is like administrator, and this would be standard mode, right? Very, very standard. And I'm actually going to write this word up here too, this acronym, principle of least privilege, right? That's essentially what user exec mode is, because you can't do all the big stuff in this mode. And the cool thing about Cisco is that there are different passwords that can initiate these different modes. So if you get a bad actor, or if you get somebody that's snooping around, they may only have access to certain information in user exec mode or standard, kind of like standard user. But they're going to need more authentication. They're going to need more passwords and more things of that nature in order to get into admin mode, which is basically here privilege exec. Okay, moving on here. So we have a couple different configurations. We have global configuration mode, which is used to access configure options in device. That's signified by the parentheses in config. Line configuration mode. Okay, this is how we're going to configure that secure shell and telnet and all these other auxiliary accesses. You'll see that with a config line with parentheses. And then we have interface configuration mode is when we're trying to configure actually one of the interfaces. We're talking about that cable that's plugged in right into one of the interfaces on the switch. Now, looking at this graphic, okay, if we take a look at this here, what do all three of these have in common? That is not a switch. That is not anything that's in parentheses. Okay. What's in common here? Okay. What's in common here? What do they all have in common? If you said the hashtags, that is correct, right? So these modes all have the hashtags, which must signify that in order to be in global config mode, in order to get in line configuration mode, in order to get into interface config mode, we must be in, let's back this up here, like a dump truck here, we must be in privilege exec, which is that admin mode, right? That's that running things as an administrator. So I am going to show you a little bit of some of the packet tracer stuff. I'm going to show you a command line here. Let me open up my packet tracer here. Now I kind of already opened up a switch and packet tracer. So hopefully this will kind of go here pretty quick. Now, as you can see here, I already have packet tracer open. Now, right off the bat, I do know that I am in user exec mode. Okay, so I'm looking at this switch right now. I'm looking at it in standard mode. This is very, very standard. But how do I get into privilege exec mode, right? What do I need to do to get into privilege exec mode? So to get into privilege exec mode, and we'll go back to the demo here in a minute, I want to type in the word enable. Enable is going to make me switch from the user exec mode to privilege exec mode. See how the hashtag, how the arrow goes to the hashtag. If I wanted to get in global configuration mode, Okay, I'm going to type in config terminal, which is basically configuring the terminal. And I'll show you how that looks here shortly. And then if I want to configure for remote sessions, right? This is the line configuration mode. I would type in line console in order to get into line config mode there. Okay. So sub configuration modes, if if I kind of screwed up, or if I'm done entering my commands and things of that nature, I'll essentially just type in either Control Z to kind of stop the items that are going on the switch, or I would type in end to stop everything and to complete everything. So let's get into this here. Let's see this here. Let's go back up to packet tracer. All right. Now, as you can see here, I am in user exec mode. This is just the standard mode, right? I can't do pretty much any of the main items in this mode. I can do very, very little in this mode. Okay. So I want to get into privilege exec mode. So I'm going to type in the word enabled. Enable. Enable actually gets me into privilege exec mode. Privilege exec mode, right? And that's signified by the hashtag right there. So I can see everything in the hashtag. Now, if I wanted to get into global configuration mode, which means that I'm ready to configure, okay, I would type in configure terminal. Uh-oh, pressed it wrong. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So configure terminal. Now we see that I am in config mode. Okay. Now I'm in config mode. So now I can start getting into configuring the terminal. Now I am in the configuration of the switch or the end device. Okay. Now, if I wanted to start configuring the line console, okay, I would type in line console, 0. And now, as you can see here, I am in line console. If I wanted to start configuring the line console, right? Now, let's say, for example, I wanted to start configuring one of the interfaces, okay? For this case, I have to take a look to see which interface there are on. Well, there's multiple interfaces on here, so we'll get into some of the simple ones. So we'll just go interface. See, I have cucumber fingers, so things get all screwed up. Interface VLAN 1, because I know there's a VLAN on this switch. So I'm going to type in interface VLAN 1. I'm just basically accessing the VLAN. And as you can see in interface mode here, I am in config IF. IF stands for the interface. Now, if I wanted to back out of that, I would type in exit. That takes me back a command. Exit again, takes me back. And if I exit one more time, now I'm back in user exec mode. Now I'm going to show you that again, because there's a couple of shortcuts that you can use that may help you out a little bit quicker. So instead of typing the word enable and press enter, you can actually type in the first two letters of the word, and tab over, hit the tab key, and it'll actually get you to enable, and you just press enter. If I wanted to get in global configuration mode, I would type in config, caps, I would type in config space T, tab over. It knows that you're looking for terminal, right? And I'll press enter, and now I am in config mode, global config mode, okay? Now, if I wanted to get into the line configuration, I would type in line console, right? I just typed in line CON, and then let's go 0, and now I am in line console mode. Now I'm ready to configure for SSH here, right? So those are some really cool ways in getting into a little bit quicker ways to get into the switches, which is pretty cool. And knowing these and knowing those shortcuts will help move things a lot faster, trying to get things a little bit quicker as you get through the configuration stuff. All right. So yeah, so already watched those videos, Control Z, all that good stuff. Now let's take a look at the command structure. Let's look at the command structure. Now, this is the basic iOS command structure. Okay, so we have the prompt, we have the command, we have the space, and the keyword argument. Okay, so essentially how it works, it's the switch. This is what we're configuring. Show is the command. Okay, space is the space in between, so we got to put a space in there. And then a keyword argument, which is where we're doing IP protocols, for example. So essentially this would be the very similar to, let's show this here. If I had, let me write this down here. Actually, no, let me bring this up here, because I just had it up here. All right. Move this right here, so not too much in the way. Hopefully you all can see this here. Okay. All right. So here's a switch, right? There's a switch. Let's use this one. Here's the switch. Okay. Here's the show, right? Here's the show. So right now we're showing config mode, global config mode. And here is the protocols, right? That's what this is. This is the keyword argument. So we have the prompt, which is a switch. We have the command, which is the config, right? We're in the global config. And there's a space in there. And then a keyword argument right here is the line console. Okay, so that's essentially how the structure works. Got to know those structures. Very important. Let's go to the next one here. A command might require one or more arguments to determine the keywords, right? And arguments required for a command refer to the command syntax. Uh-oh, lost my microphone here. Boldface text indicates commands and keywords that are entered and shown, italicized. Okay, so basically, essentially, this is how all the different commands can come up, right? Some can be in different boldface texts, italicized, okay, square brackets, and things of that nature. All right. Ping command. Now, see, these are some of these commands that we were talking about that I told you that are kind of universal. These are some of the commands that have been adopted by Cisco, but they're also used in other networking devices. So there's that ping command, right? There's that ping. There's that Marco Polo, right? When you're pinging an IP address. And then there's trace route. When you're trying to trace route to an IP address to kind of see what route that information is taking, trying to figure out where it's going or how it's getting there. iOS help features. The iOS has two forms of help available: context-sensitive help and command syntax checker. Context-sensitive help enables you to quickly find answers to the questions: which commands are available from the each command mode, which commands start the specific characters or the group of characters, which arguments and keywords are available to particular commands. As you can see here, there's an example here. Take note of this example. They're running this in privilege exec mode, right, because of the hashtag. Command syntax check verifies the availability command was entered correctly. So essentially, if you don't enter it in correctly, it'll basically tell you it is invalid, and it'll give you the character and area in which it was invalid. Okay, move on here. Now, there's some short keys, some hotkeys within Packet Tracer, and also in using the Cisco command iOS. The iOS command line provides hotkeys and shortcuts that make configuring, monitoring, and troubleshooting a lot easier, absolutely. So commands and keywords can be shortened to the minimum number of characters. For example, configure can be shortened to config, with just the word con. So let me actually show you that, which is pretty cool. I have it actually here, and I am in exec mode. We're going to switch to privilege exec mode. So before I do that, instead of typing in the actual word, right, if I were to type in the full word enable, right, and now I am in full privilege exec mode, I'm going to exit out of that. Now, instead of typing in the word enable, I'm just going to type the first two letters, and I'm going to tab over, hit the tab key, and that's going to give me the word enable. So that's essentially, that's a quicker way of getting through the information, right? Getting to your command structures that you need to be able to get to pretty quick. And the way I did that again, let me just show you again really quick so you can see that. Let's exit out here really quick. What I did was I typed in EN and I hit the tab key, and there we go. There's enable. Just by hitting the tab key over, it essentially knew where I needed to go. Now let's do another one. My PowerPoint says to use the config, right? So let's try that one. So instead of typing in configure terminal, which I can get there, right, by doing typing in the word configure terminal, right? All I have to do is really just type in con. Config, right? So I typed in config, hit tab over for configure, and I'm going to type the first three letters of the word terminal, press tab, and there we go. Now I'm in configure terminal, right? Another way you can do it is actually typing in config T. That'll actually get you into configuration mode as well, which is super, super duper cool. All right. So again, I just showed you what these shortcuts were here, these hotkeys. I just hit using the tab key. Backspace erases the characters. And then if you were to use the left arrow, Control B, moves the cursors closer to the left. Right arrow, as you can see here. These are pretty cool, these little short keys. I typically kind of go old school. I essentially like to hit the backspace buttons if I'm trying to move it per se. I'm usually using the arrows to move things over and things of that nature. So that's just kind of the way my brain works. Hotkeys and shortcuts continue. When a command output produces more text, okay, you'll see the word more, all right? And you'll see that once you are going through some of the packet tracer activities, especially when you run the show running config file, which I'll show you that here in a minute. It'll spit out some information, then it'll say more, right? That means there's more information from the command that you gave it, okay? And as you can see here, it's basically saying you hit enter, space bar goes to the next screen, and it just kind of just gives you more information, which is super cool. Continue here. All right. These are some of the packages. All right, so let's get into the basic device configurations. All right. So device names, right? We got to be able to change the name to a device. It's kind of like naming your computer, right? You get a brand new computer that you buy, maybe from Best Buy, or if you build a machine, you're going to want to give it a name. So same thing with Cisco. There's some options there that you can do to rename your equipment, those intermediary devices. So the first configuration command of any device should be given as a unique host name, right? We want to change the host name. By default, all devices are assigned its factory default name. For example, Cisco iOS switch is a switch. As you can see here, let me pull my Cisco back up here. My switch is the switch, right? I have not configured it to any host name as of just yet. I'm going to show you that here in a minute. Guidelines for naming a device: start with a letter, no spaces, end with a letter or digit. So you can kind of make this however you would like to make it. So for example, the example gives you configure terminal, shortcut could be config T. I know we kind of talked about that. Host name, switch floor -1. So this is going to be on, the switch is going to be on floor number 1. As soon as you press enter, it actually switches it from the word switch to the name that you give it. So let's give that a shot. Let's see how that looks in real life. So I am in config T. I'm going to type in the word host name, okay? And we're just going to call it Cisco. And there it is. So I just gave it a host name, called it Cisco, and now it switched. Now my switch name is now called Cisco. I named it Cisco. And the way I did that was typed in the word host name, space, and then Cisco. That's how I renamed the switch. Now, passwords, right? You definitely want to give it some strong passwords. So in today's cybersecurity, today's data, everybody's hacking everybody. A lot of bad actors out there, a lot of good actors, some positive people out there trying to do good things, the right things. You still want to try to have some really, really strong passwords, especially on these switches. Because when it comes to your data, again, we talked about that data that moves through our cyberspace, right? Every time our data moves, it's going to go through some type of intermediary device. There's some type of cabling that's going to transfer that data that goes from somewhere else. If that data gets hacked, right, we need to make sure we are securing the switches that handle that data. It's the same as, if you guys remember the example that I used with the mail truck, right? We always talk about the mail truck. As soon as that mail truck takes our mail and it goes off to where it needs to go, that we need to have some locks, right, to secure that mail truck as much as possible. So passwords are very, very important, right? Passwords are very important. So I'm not going to get into this too much. Passwords is pretty standard, right? You don't want to use weak passwords, right? One of the number one easiest passwords out there that people use, the word password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, things of that nature. So we definitely don't want to use any of those. So some of the password guidelines is use passwords that are more than 8 characters. I say more than that, 8 characters, but definitely want at least 8 characters. Use combination of lower and uppercase letters. Yes, you definitely want to avoid using passwords on all your devices. Now, that's very important. You really don't want to do that. Definitely change that up. I know some of you all using some of your same passwords for all your accounts. Don't do that. Definitely don't want to do that. And do not use common passwords. So very important. Do not use common passwords. So let's look into configuring the password. And we're going to go back to this here in a second, since I already have the iOS open here, the command line open. So securing user exec mode, right? This is essentially, we want to set up how to configure passwords on the user exec mode, because we don't want anybody to get into user exec mode. This is the initial, right? So you're going to enter the first line, console configuration mode, using the line console 0, command in a global config mode. Next, you're going to specify user exec, you're entering the password, right? And then finally, you're going to hit the word login. You're going to type in the word login. So essentially, the syntax, you're saying switch, number 1, we're going to configure terminal. We're going to line console 0. We're going to give it a password Cisco. And then we're going to set it to a login. And then we're going to end it. So let's do that. Let's actually check that out here. So I'm going to put my Cisco switch up here. All right. Now, for this example, my PowerPoint is basically using switch floor 1. I've already configured my host name to be Cisco, as you see here. All right. So what I'm going to do is, I'm already in config mode. Let's actually go out of that so we can see it from the beginning. So let's go out one more time. All right. So I am in user exec. All right. And I'm going to type enable. Now I am in privilege exec. And I need to go into config T. Right. Now I'm in configure terminal. So here goes the syntax. We're going to go line. Let me move my cursor. Sorry about that. Line console 0. Okay. And we're going to give it a password. Let's give it a unique name. Let's call it Lakers. Let's give it a password Lakers. And yes, I am a big-time Laker fan, so if you are a Clipper fan, I'm sorry. You can actually turn off this video right now. I apologize. Anyway, we're going to go back to password Lakers. Okay. Password Lakers. And then I'm going to type in login. So now I'm telling it that In order to get into this privilege exec mode, we need to make sure that we set it as a login. I'm going to press end to end everything, and now we should be good. So let's test it. I want to test it to make sure it's working. So I'm going to hit exit. There it is. Now I'm on the password. All right. So if I go back up here, when I press enter, I was already in user exec mode. I typed in enable, and I went config T. Now when I enabled it, that put me into privilege exec. As you can see here, as soon as I press enter, now it's prompting me for a password. And if you remember what the password was, the password is Lakers. It's encrypted, you can't see it. And now I am in my switch. Now I'm ready to go. Now I'm in my switch. But we're not done. We are absolutely not done. So now we want to secure privilege exec mode, right? We want to make it a secret password, right? We want this to be very, very secret. So for the example, it says configure T, all right, config T, config terminal. Now we're going to enable secret, right? Enable secret, and then exit, right? So here, let's take a look at that. Let's see how that works here. So I'm going to type in enable. There we go. So now I am in privilege exec. I'm going to go config T. Now I'm going to type enable secret class, press enter, and exit. All right. Now it should be a secret password. So here, now we are ready to go here. But one thing I forgot to show you, I want you to see, is actually I made the secret password the word class. All right. The secret password is the word class. So if I were to go all the way out, to get into my switch, I'm going to type in Lakers. There we go. Now to get into privilege exec mode, I'm going to type in the word class. And there we go. So now I am in my switch. So let's say if I wanted to change that, right? So let's go config T, enable, secret, and let's call it NBA. Exit. So now the secret password, let's go all the way out. We said it was Lakers to get in. I'm going to go into privilege exec mode. Now I'm going to type in the word NBA. Now I'm into my switch. So this is pretty cool, being able to switch these out. You can change the different names, right? One gets you in to the switch, which is that user exec mode, and then you want to be able to secure it. Very important that you want to be able to secure that information. Now, securing virtual lines, right? We want to be able to secure remote access. So this is very important. Why would we want to be able to remote into our switch here? Why is that important to be able to remote into the switch? I can tell you why. If you're hired on as a network administrator, most of the times, I know I have buddies that are in the field, most of the time they don't sleep at night. Because if the availability of the systems go down, guess what they're calling? They're essentially going to call the network administrators. They're going to need to be able to remote into the switch to kind of see what's going on. They want to see what is the issues that potentially are going on with the switch. Is there a couple ports that are down, or the VLANs are not configured correctly? You may not know. So what I want you to do is think of that truck again, right? You want to make sure that this vehicle is continuing to move that data, right? But you want to be able to have remote access to it as much as you can. So in this example, first you're going to enter the VTI lines configuration mode using VTI line VTY 0 through 15. Command is global config mode. Specify your password. And finally, you want to enable this as a login, right? You want to be able to log this in. Very important. So let's take a look at this in real action here. Let's see how this looks here. So I'm going to type in, let's go all the way out again, because we already have things already set up here. Let's go all the way out. Okay, so we're going to get into our switch. We're going to type in the word Lakers. We're going to go enable. I believe to get into our privileged exec mode was NBA. That was our secret password there. So keeping it along the lines of basketball, I'm going to go config T. Now I'm in config mode, right? I'm in the configure terminal mode. Take note again, my host name switch is Cisco. All right. Now I'm going to type in line VTY. Just going to type in 0. Actually, I'm sorry, 0 through 15. And I'm going to give it a password. Let's see here. Let's pick another NBA team that's out there. Let's call it Bulls. As a Laker fan, I'm not a Bulls fan either, but it's okay. We'll call it Bulls. I'm going to press enter. We're going to make that a login because we want to be able to log in with that. And we're going to press end. And voila. Now our remote access is good to go now. So now what we need to do, now that we've already set these things up, right? We want to make sure we can secure these passwords. We want to encrypt this information. We don't want anybody to see what this information looks like. So before we do this, I want to show you why we want to encrypt this information. So what I'm going to do here, we've already been working on this iOS here. You guys been watching me not encrypt, you guys watching me set up this switch here. So before we do anything here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the word. I'm going to get into my switch here. Move this out of the way just for a quick second. I'm going to get into privilege exec. I'm going to type in NBA. Now I'm going to run this command right here, show running config. And I'm going to use the tab features that I've just taught you all, and I'm going to press enter. All right. Now, some pretty cool information here. Pretty cool information. So, I type in show running config. As you can see, I enabled my secret password. That's encrypted, which is really, really good, right? We don't want anybody to be able to see that information. Take a note here. There's that more feature that was on the previous slide. So I'm going to press enter to continue going. It gives me all of my interface information to see what's on, what's up and running. I'm going to continue to hit the enter key because I picked a switch that has multiple ports to it. I'm going to continue going here. All right. There's no VLAN that's set up, but we did configure the line console and we configured the remote access. Now take a note here. What can you see here? We see that the line console is set to the password Lakers. That's to get in, right? To get into the privilege exec mode here. Now, if I wanted to get into the remote access, we see that the password is set to Bulls. And we see that it's set to a login. Now, let's kind of switch gears from a networking hat. Let's get into a protecting systems hat, network administrative security. It is very important that we want to make sure all this information is encrypted in case somebody were to get into your network. So if I was a bad actor, and I was able to get into your switch, if I were to run this command, and things that are not encrypted, I would be able to see how to get into this remotely, right? Now, this is pending if I'm actually locally plugged in to this switch. I would have the keys to get into this switch from remote access because it's in plain text. That's not good. This is like not good at all. We want to make sure that we hide this information. So the starter config, running config files, we want to encrypt everything that's in plain text. So to do that, we're going to type in the word service password encryption. So let's see what that looks like. So again, take note here, we have Password Bulls is in plain text. Line configurations in Lakers is in plain text. You can see all these things in plain text. Now, let's go here. We are in privilege exec. I'm going to type in config T. There we go. Now, what I want to do is encrypt the passwords. So I'm going to type in service, and you can tab over password encryption, and I just tabbed over. Press enter, and I'm going to press exit, and now these passwords should be encrypted. Now I'm going to run that same command again, the show running config file, and let's verify that these items are indeed encrypted. Now we know this one's encrypted because we gave it the command enable secret, right? We don't want anybody to see this information. So let's continue down here. Remember, we knew that the VTIY lines were set to a certain thing and the line counts was set to a certain thing. So let's take a look here. Let's see what we got. Let's see if the service encryption password actually worked. There it is, folks. It actually worked. There it is. So beforehand, information was populated here. Now the passwords have been encrypted here, right? They have been hashed. Now, the only thing that I see, if I am a bad actor, I would see that the algorithm has hashed these values absolutely same, even though I can't see this, but I would know that these two passwords are the same based on the encryption method here. But I still can't see the actual password to get in. I can't put this information into the switch in order to get in, so it's not going to work. All right. Moving on here, moving on. Now let's configure a banner, which is pretty cool. The banner message is important, warn unauthorized personnel from attempting to access the device. So essentially, this is one of those situations when you go into an unauthorized building, you usually see a sign that says no unauthorized access, right? Don't come in here. Do not come in here at all. So what we want to do, we want to be able to put a little message on there, right? We want to alert whoever is accessing the intermediary device, watch out. These are make sure you're authorized to access this information. So to create a banner of the day, okay, we're going to use type in the word banner, MOTD, message of the day. We're going to end it with a hashtag, and we're going to actually put in the message. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at my switch here that I have here. Now let me exit all the way out. Now right now, when I press enter, there's nothing. There's no banner information here at all. So there's nothing has been configured here in this situation. So let's get into that. I'm going to get into my switch. I want to get into privilege exec mode. All right. Let's move this over here for a quick second. Now, in order to get into privilege exec mode, we need to configure the terminal. So I'm going to type in config T. There we go. Now I'm going to type in the word banner, message of the day, space with a hashtag. Now I'm going to type in, I'm going to actually copy exactly what it says here. So it says authorized access only, exclamation, and then we're going to end it with the hashtag and then press enter. Let's verify if that works. And there it is. I forgot the letter O because I have cucumber fingers. Sorry. But there it is. Authorized access only. User access available. So this is a little message that you can put in before that. So let's do it again. Let's get into config mode. Let's get into privilege exec. I'm going to go config T. And I'm going to type in banner, message of the day, hashtag. And let's put I love networking so do not mess with this switch or else. Then I will put a little exclamations, and then I will put the, I'll end it with the hashtag. And I'm going to type exit. So now if I were to try to get into the switch, there it is. I love networking, so do not mess with this switch or else. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right. So we already got into that. Now it's time to save the configurations. Now we need to save everything. It's one of those situations you put in all that work. You do all of that cool work, right? You configure the switch. You do everything you need. You configure the VTIY lines. You configure all of the pertinent information, encryption, all that, but you need to save it, right? You need to hit that save key to make sure you actually save the information. So there are two system files that store on the devices. So we have the startup config. This is the save configuration that the file stored on the NVRAM. It contains all the commands that will be used by the device upon startup or reboot. The flashes do not lose its contents when the device is powered off. Then we have the running config. This is stored on a random access memory. This is RAM, which is volatile. You lose it when you turn it off. It reflects the current configurations, modifying and running configurations affects the operation of Cisco devices immediately. RAM is volatile. There it is. It loses all of its memory as soon as you power it off, right? So essentially, volatile meaning that as soon as you pour gasoline on something, light it up, bam, blows up right away. So to save changes made in the running config to startup configuration files, you can use the copy running config startup config privilege exec mode and command. This is how you save the information. So for example, here it has show startup config, has all the information here, and then show running config, and it builds. It has all the timestamps, right? All the information that comes up. So let's take a look here. Let me go full mode here so you can see this. There we go. All right, so let's get into my switch. We're going to get into the switch. We're going to type in the word password. We are in user exec mode. We want to get into privilege exec mode. Type in the word MBA. Now our level of authorization has gone up a little bit, which is awesome. Now I'm going to type in the word show startup config. And there is no startup configuration. Interesting, right? There's no timestamp. Same thing. There is no startups. All right. So let's do show running configs. And there's our running configuration. Kind of what we talked about earlier, right? I keep pressing enter. We have all of our information here. We see our encryption, which is great, right? We also see the banner of the day. That's something new that's in there. The banner of the day has showed up because we just configured that. It has all of our password. Everything is secure there, which is really, really good. But we want to save all these items. We want to get these things saved. So we're going to type in copy, running config, startup, press enter. Uh-oh, that's because I hit my cucumber fingers again. Press enter. Destination file name, press enter again, hit OK. Now it is building our configuration. So now we should have a startup, right? We should have a startup. It's building the configuration. So let's test that. Show startup config. And there it is. There's our startup configuration. So before, when I press enter, there was nothing there. So I can go back up here. I can show that. Well, as you can see, there was nothing there as soon as I typed in the show startup configuration. Now, as soon as I typed it in, after we copied it, right? Copy running config. Now typed in show running config. Now it populates information. Now we're here. So this shows all the configurations that we've already done to the switch. This is pretty important. This is one of the steps that you will see when you do the packet tracers labs, is that you need to save your work, right? You need to save it. So you'll see it as one of the line items. You need to make sure that you save all of your information. And this is how you save the info. Kind of like Montel Jordan. This is how you do it. All that good stuff, right? Alter the running configurations mode. If changes made to the running config do not have the desired effect on running config, has not yet been saved, you can restore the device to its previous configuration. To do this, you remove the change commands individually. Reload the device, reload. So essentially, if you mess up, right, if you can't find the information, if you're not understanding where it's at, you can reload it. You can try to find it. You can erase it and essentially try it all over again. Now, capture a text file in PuTTY. This is kind of some of the simulations. I'm not going to show you that here, but this is how you would do it in PuTTY. Open up a terminal, such as PuTTY, right? Enable login terminal software. And this is, they're using the file name MySwitch. So essentially, it's kind of like saving a file. If you were to open up a regular document and you want to save it, this is how you would get to it, right? You want to make sure you save that information, which is very important. And then you can capture the text file here. You can show the running configuration information, even using PuTTY, term, things of that nature. Ports and addresses. IP addresses. The use of IP addresses is primary means of enabling devices to locate one another to establish end-to-end communication on the internet. So if you go back to the beginning, end-to-end communication. Let's think of that mail truck again. That mail truck that's coming to your house to pick up that data and get it to your destination that you need to get it to. It's going to need an IP address. Those homes that are on that block that we talked about, all of those, that cul-de-sac, each one of those homes are going to have their own separate house number. Those are essentially IP addresses. Those are end devices. So in order to have the end-to-end communication, they need to know where to send it to, and they need to know where it came from. It's got to have that IP addresses. So the structure of an IP version 4 is called dotted decimal notation. It represents by 4 decimal numbers between 0 and 255. IP version 4 subnet mask is 32-bit value systems. IP version 4 address is 32 bits, has 4 octets with 8 bits in between them. The default gateway address is an IP address is the router, basically the router, and the host will use that to get to where it needs to get to. IP version 6 has 128 bits. That's 128 bits. Quick question. How many people are on this whole entire Earth? Typically around 4 billion people. But there are, there are about 8 billion people on this planet. But there are only 4 billion IP version 4 addresses available. So one way to get around that is to use IP version 6. And some of the later modules, I'll show you a little bit more on how this works, which is awesome. IP version 6 addresses are 128 bits in length. Every 4 bits is represented by a hexadecimal for a total of 32 hexadecimal values. So it gives you a little bit more information. This is essentially, IP version 4 would be kind of like this small house on the street. IP version 6, just think of it as a big mansion or like a big building, right? There's just a whole bunch of information there, different types of versions to get to the information. Now, in order for that information to go out, right, in order for that data to move through the intermediary devices, it needs to have cables. It's got to be some form of cables, whether it be wireless, going through satellite, anything of that nature. It needs to be able to move. So network communication depends on end-to-end user device interfaces, network devices, interfaces, and cables that connect them. Types of network media include twisted pair cables, fiber optic cables, coaxial cables, wireless. This is how we move that data. This is essentially, these are the roads that those trucks are on. This is how it gets there. Different types of network media have different features and benefits. Some of the differences between various types of media include distance in media can successfully carry a signal. So fiber optics use a lot of LED lights to move those ones and zeros. Environment and the cost of getting that information, or the cost of getting that cabling. Typically, everybody in your home, you probably are using Wi-Fi, wireless, or you're using Ethernet cabling, RJ45 connections. Some of the big higher up companies that have these big switches, like I showed you in the beginning of this video, somebody were to show this switch to you, what do? They're using a lot of these networks, They're using a lot of these devices because they have multiple buildings that need to be connected. So to configure IP addressing, right? Let's go back to that house being built. Brand new house on the cul-de-sac that gets built. As soon as it's ready to go live, there has to be an address that gets put on it, right? So we need to configure that. So this is essentially taking a house and putting a number on the house so you can identify the number of the house. So let's configure. What does that look like? IP addressing. So you can configure it to a static or you can configure it to a dynamic. Static means that it doesn't move. It stays right where it's at. Dynamic means that it's always changing. So end devices on the network need IP addresses in order to communicate with other devices. Like we talked about, it needs to have those IP addresses in order to know where it goes to. So IP version 4 address, which is 32 bits, addresses information can be entered into the devices manually or dynamic. So we just kind of talked about that. The way it uses dynamic, where it means that it gets assigned, is Data Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. So to manually configure these, you essentially need to go into the control panel, network sharing, in order. It kind of looks like this, like a little pane that looks like this. For Mac, it may look a little different, but for a Windows machine, this is where you will go to get into changing the information as far as IP addresses. Now, let me show you here. I do have a little packet tracer here that I put together here. I just made a quick little network topology here. Now, I want to configure these two PCs. So on Packet Tracer, essentially you just double click on it. I want to go into desktop. And right here where it says IP configuration, I'm going to click on IP configuration. So the way Cisco shows it, this is essentially the same. This is kind of the Windows version, but the virtual environment here for Cisco is kind of the same thing. We're going to configure to a static IP version 4 address. So for IP version 4, I'm just going to type in just a basic one, 192.168.1.2. And as soon as I click off of it, it's automatically going to populate the subnet mask. This is a zip code of this computer, 255.255.255.0. And by the way, these first 3 octets are all on. This last octet is 0. It's off. So this IP address 192.168.1.2. All right, so let me close that. Now I'm going to go into this PC, do the same thing. Go to IP configuration, we're static, and I'm going to give this a 192.168.1.3. Now, just for the sake of everything, I didn't name the first computer .1 because I'm saving that for my router if I were to configure a router. So that's just kind of, you can configure the IP address of router any way you want. This is just how I'm doing it here. But we're not doing a router just yet. So this is 192.168.1.3. Take note of the same subnet mask. So these two machines are in the same network. So I configure these two items to be on the same network, and they're configured with these two switches. Now, the way Cisco works, obviously, if you see the green, that means there's a good connection. right? Those connections are very, very good there. So that's how you get into configuring the IP addresses of these machines. Now, cool thing with Packet Tracer, if I were to take my cursor and just highlight it, like I did here, you can actually see the IP configuration information on here. It tells you 192.168.1.2. If I were to click the other one here, or just hover, it gives me 192.168.1.3. All right. Now, automatic addressing, okay? DHCP enables automatic IPv4 addresses configuration for every end device that is DHCP enabled. So essentially what this means, kind of think of this as, if DHCP is enabled, think about this as when a brand new house gets built, when a brand new house gets built, who's going to give the house the addresses, right? They have to be able. Somebody's got to come out and say, "Hey, this new home development is being built. We're going to give this house this address. We're going to give this house this address. We're going to give this house this address." That's what DHCP does. It's a pool of addresses that are available. So as soon as a computer logs onto the network, or if as soon as it attaches itself to a network, or as soon as that RJ45 connection Ethernet cable is connected, it's going to basically get into discovery. It's going to say, hey, I need to be able to get out to the internet. And if you remember a couple slides before this, in order for a computer to communicate on the network, it needs to have a IP address to communicate. So DHCP that's what it does. It gives out that information, right? It gives out those IP addresses. So it's going to assign those IP addresses automatically. So you don't have to do anything. So you don't have to do the static, which is super cool. All right, so now we're going to get into configuring the VLAN of a switch. And I'll show you that here in just a little bit. So to access the switch remotely, an IP address and a subnet must be configured on the same virtual switch. It's got to be on the same virtual interface. So enter the interface VLAN command IP address. We're going to give it IP address. So let's do this. So let's get into my switch. Let's put this right here. Okay. And there's our wonderful message of the day that we configured. So let's get into the switch. We're going to type in Lakers, and we're going to go into privilege exec mode. We're going to type in the word NBA. And now we want to configure the VLAN, right? We want to configure the VLAN. So the way we do that, we're going to go config T because we want to configure. We're going to type in interface. I'm going to tab over. Actually, I'm sorry, I forgot the F. I'm going to tab over VLAN number 1. There we go. Now, I know I'm configuring one of the interfaces because I see the if command here. That's short for interface. So configure interface. So I'm going to give it an IP address. Now, if you remember in my packet tracer, let me pull this up here really quick so you can see this. In my packet tracer, I gave this first computer 192.168.1.2, and I gave this machine 192.168.1.3. So this one was a .2, this one was a .3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give this a IP address. Actually, I'm sorry, space. We're going to go IP address 192.168.1.4. And it's going to give it a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And I'm going to tell it to no shutdown, which means I'm going to keep that line up so it doesn't shut down. I'm going to press enter. And now it has changed to up. And now my VLAN is completely up, which is super cool. Everything is up, ready to go. So now we need to verify the connectivity. All right. So let's take a look at the verifying the connectivity. Let's go full screen here. And yes, you're going to need to do the practice modules right after this. But let's verify. Let's take a look at making sure that this information is actually working. All right. So going back to our Marco Polos, we're going to type in the ping command to verify that this information is good to go. Make sure that we are able to see things move. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put up this little simulation icon here. Okay, I'm going to move that here so you can see it. And we're going to see these packets move. So first thing I'm going to do, this computer is 192.168.1.2, and I believe this one is 192.168.1.3. So I'm going to go into my .2 computer. I'm going to command prompt right here, and I'm going to type in the ping command, 192.168.1.3. Press enter, and as you can see, when I'm pressing enter, okay, there's that first little envelope that shows up. There's that mail, right? There's that mail that shows up. And let's go over here and hit play. And as you can see virtually, we can see that that ping request go to the switch, and now it hits the computer. And now it goes back to the switch, and then information goes back to the computer and it says we've been successfully. Right? So everything is there. So those commands, they show up. All right. Let's turn that off there. So let me turn off the simulation here for a quick second here. Let's go real time here and switch that to real time so you can see. Now I switch it to real time so you can actually see the command, how it works in command prompt. So let me do that again. I'm going to ping it. And as you can see in real time, the replies, 4 basically Marco Polos were sent, and then 4 were received. So let's test more connectivity. Let's go into the switch. Let's actually ping from the switch. Let's see if that works as well. So let's exit out of here. Let's go to config mode. Okay. Let's ping 192.168.1.3. Let's see what we get here. 80% made it. Let's ping it again. There it is. Now we have 100% success rate. So we sent a Marco Polo from the switch onto this computer. All right. So this computer was configured on, I believe it was a .4. The switch was configured to .4, and the PC, this first PC was configured to a .3. All right. So let's go through the switch again. Oh, sorry. Go back to the switch. And let's go ping 192.168.1.2. We have 100% success rate. So those markable. So this is very important. The reason why I'm showing you this is very important because when it comes to connectivity, when you want to make sure that things are connected, as soon as you set up a Cisco lab, you have everything all set up. Everything looks very well. Everything looks great. You got all the topologies looking good. Everything looks great. You have to verify. You got to make sure that those Marco Polos are going in between those devices. You need to make sure that that mail truck is able to get out of that cul-de-sac and get to where it needs to get to, where it's not incorporating, where it's not getting into any snow or anything like that for bad weather. Make sure there's no flat tires on the truck. We got to make sure that everything gets there. That's why you have to verify. That's essentially what this is. You're essentially verifying that this information is getting to where it needs to get to. All right, so that's going to conclude Module 2. I hope you guys enjoyed this video at Tandy IT. Make sure you check out Module 3.